Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to our Film Veterans series. And I am so honored and lucky to be speaking with someone I've worked with, someone I've admired, someone who is probably considered the top or in the top five makeup people in the entire planet, Donald J. Mowat. He began working in makeup in the 80s, working his way up from an assistant to department head to makeup designer. He's been a personal to so many incredible actors like Anthony Hopkins, Donald Sutherland, Kiefer Sutherland, Eminem, Daniel Craig, Jared Leto, and Jake Gyllenhaal, among so many others. He's worked with some of the top directors in Hollywood, including multiple films with Denis Villeneuve, so many others. He's worked in film, television. I heard you even worked in opera. You've done low budget, high budget. You've definitely seen Donald's work. He's done 8 Mile, Blade Runner 2049, Dune, Prisoners, Presumed Innocent, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Sicario. I mean, we could go on. He is a recipient of an Emmy Award, 3 BAFTA nominations, nominated for an Oscar for his work on Dune. He even got the Order of Canada in 2022, and he got a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Hollywood Beauty Awards this year. Congratulations. I
You.
had to leave out about 14 of your other awards due to time and about 100 of your other credits. Let's suffice it to say, it's really incredible that you're here, and thank you so much. Besides all of that, and Donald is still working, after 4 decades, he does a lot of advocacy work with BAFTA Los Angeles and other organizations to help bring young people into the film business, which of course we're going to talk about that because I admire that so much.
I just wanted to say, because we talked about advocacy, and you and I have spoken before
Yeah.
about working with your script supervisors court, which is world renowned. And what I just wanted to say about that is that there is such a shortage as we all get mature and time out in the industry, is that there's so few people who really are putting practicing what they preach. So I admire so much what you do, and the thing that I share with you and other people who are working in the industry is that everyone should study everybody else's discipline and craft.
Yes. Oh my God, we've been having so much fun talking to every department.
Yeah. If everybody who did makeup or hair or costume or script supervising or editing or gaffer actually had a couple of lessons, a couple of master classes of what everyone does, then I think we'd be in a much better place than we are today, of shortage of training and things like that, because people don't really, we're much more isolated. So I really was paying you a compliment. This is not about me, but say, because you're doing so much in an area that, as we know, very few people can actually say, how do you learn to be a script supervisor? And what avenue do people take? So I wanted to put that out there too. So
Oh, thank you. Well, we're definitely going to talk about it because we're so in alignment about the need for training and like the lack of it.
it's interesting. So, even for me starting, because now that I look back and here I'm looking at Mexico City on a gloomy day, but at 23 million people, it's bigger than LA and New York and LA combined. And when I come here to work, it's my third project here. I think, people forget it's a big world we're in, and people make movies all over the world. And a thing that happens, whether you're in Toronto or LA or London, people kind of get very cosseted in these worlds. Now, you work internationally. I certainly do.
Yeah.
There are people you kind of go, guys, wait a second. No, 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 no. There's a whole People have been making movies here in Mexico City for as long as they did in Hollywood. And the same way in Canada, when we used to feel like the poor Canadian cousin. I had the feeling, I was there, and it's one of the reasons I left.
I was going to ask you why you left. Yeah, yeah.
It was a big part of it, because I I used to feel like, how come when I go to Los Angeles, I feel like I can say I need 5 makeup artists tomorrow. But in Toronto back in the day, you'd have to beg and say why. And our own production wasn't supporting us. And we were a service industry. And for everything we were seeing on the outside, and I come to Mexico City, I have a wonderful crew with me here. We've been on all kinds of films that are, obviously in Spanish, but, I come from Montreal, and then I was in Toronto, but we became very sort of cloistered in a way that we forgot how other people work. And
Yeah.
actually, it's pretty much the same everywhere in the world. I do feel like we just get isolated, and by not talking to people, by finding out, oh, I'd love to talk to another makeup HOD or a special effects makeup or a script supervisor from here or there, that we're more bridged and more unified than all of this separate how it's done here. And that was something I learned very quickly in my career.
I read that in your early days, you were finding it hard to enter the business. Is that true? Yeah.
It was, you know what, Danielle, when I'm teaching or when I'm invited to go to places for BAFTA or the Academy or, well, anybody, I always think, I remind people, everyone is kind of not that far removed from saying once upon a time women couldn't become doctors. Once upon a time a person of color couldn't go to a law school. In the career I chose, I felt a great deal of hostility and homophobia in
Oh,
my early life, because even though in the outside world of London and New York and Los Angeles, when I was a kid and I saw films, and my dad and I would go to Cinema 5 in Montreal and see all these great movies, I looked and saw the names, and all the makeup, head makeup designed by chief makeup, were men. But where I lived in Montreal, which was kind of provincial and parochial, people were like, oh, that's a girl's job. That's for sissies. That's for, I won't even use the words that were used back then. It was very, that is not a suitable job. Even at school level, when I was in theater and children's theater, and people said, what do you want to do? I said, I'm kind of digging this makeup thing. And this odd, eccentric kid, I know that's hard to believe, uh, people said, are you kidding? And so the resistance, and so even starting out, when I started in Montreal, there was only one other man doing makeup at that time. At the CBC in French, Radio-Canada, there were, but in the freelance at what used to be called STCVQ, there was one other man. And that gave me this thing. The first job I did in Toronto, I was called out. I don't know, it was a NABET permittee to Global TV. And I waited in the lobby for someone to get me. And this woman said, oh, I've been standing there. I just expected to see a woman.
wow. We take it so for granted, eh?
For me, it was so hard at the beginning because people didn't actually encourage it or like it very much.
Wow. I was talking to Rico the other day about being a key grip of color because I was remembering just being I'm saying a girl because I was 23, just being a woman. It was very scary. I was literally not feeling like I even fit in until 1994.
That sounds about right, because when I went from, Montreal in 85 to Toronto, I had an incredibly warm, a much warmer welcome in Toronto. My Montreal homies will be very upset because I explained this to Denis Villeneuve once, and he was, and we often speak in French to each other. But I
Oh,
did, Denis, I hate to tell you, but Montreal was way harder, way more homophobic than Toronto was. But Toronto, and I was welcomed into ACFC, which
that's where
was
I started too.
right, which was a phenomenal union. I mean, it was a great group and welcomed in. So my beginning went from Montreal to being a day, Joshua then and now, Ted Kotcheff's film, working under some great people, and then Toronto with Shauna Jabor and Anna Green Gables, and it launched. It just, I felt very supported. It took off for me. I had a real community, but IATSE was like only for those big bad American films. Um, I was all about Canadian, and we had
You have
this.
a beautiful resume of Canadian films and then a beautiful resume of American films and now like just top of the world stuff.
Yeah, well, it's changed. I really feel. I mean, I don't want to say I feel sorry for new people, but I do think we had a moment. We kind of blew it, because the late great Shirley Douglas said, without a star system in Canada, we were really perpetually, I can't say it here, but starts with an F and ends in a D. But everyone attacked it. Karen Kane and the late, great Maureen Forrester, the opera singer, all these different performers approached it. But Shirley Douglas was the one performer in Canada, and she was my greatest friend, but Shirley
Oh,
was the one person who always said, unless we have this industry that we have a star system in Canada, we won't have star filmmakers in supporting positions. I think about that because in retrospect, I mean, everything she said was right because her endorsement of me helped me with other people, getting in the world of things, right? Because she knew all kinds of people and the history she had. But she's absolutely right because we had CBC when they made things.
Mhm.
We had National Film Board, which was ONF in Quebec, which made films that actually went to the Oscars and won Oscars. We had Anna Green Gables, we had Banting and Best, we had all these shows. And I think she's right. Once we lost that, I think we all were like going, well, Atlantis Films got sold, and that was Seton McLean and all those guys. And we were really proud of the work we did to suddenly find ourselves going, what do we do now? And then it was the low dollar and let's get on these MOWs and the few American features coming in. And everybody basically walked away from our Canadian content or culture. And it's kind of sad in a way. But feel very fortunate I had that upbringing to have worked on Margaret's Museum and Anna Green Gables and those projects, because we were trained. I think we were trained very well, and we worked with great people, and they were Canadian content in the way that we did co-productions.
And we, I have a number of students in the UK. For those who don't know about the Canadian system, we basically learned the British way.
That's right. It's funny you say that because that's how CBC was set up. Apart from makeup and hair being two separate but under makeup. So the hair stylists out there will, don't be upset, but there was a reason because at the CBC, the makeup department, which was under the costume department, which was under production design. But if you go back far enough, when I started getting my first jobs in Toronto, you were interviewed by the production designer.
Oh, I thought that was still the case. It's not the case?
No, it hasn't been for a while. But it was at one point the production designer. They really were in charge of putting that together. So there was a cohesive look.
That makes sense.
Right. And then you take other departments that are hired by the cinematographer, and now it's just all over the place. And so people who are studying film will go, how did that happen? Well, that's how I got my first big job as an HOD was Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future, which we called Captain Paycheck at the time. In retrospect, I look back and go, wow, it was pretty interesting what we were doing 40 years ago in an old TTC warehouse in Toronto, but it certainly gave me great training.
Oh, yeah. So who do you interview with now? The director will call you directly.
Usually the director. Now we're in it's awkward for us because now what's happening, and often you'll be requested by an actor, a lead actor may or may not have an exclusive personal person. In that case, he or she may decide on who the department head is.
Oh.
Director, like you hear so often, is losing a lot of that control. Unless you have a director like Denis Villeneuve or Damien Chazelle who will say unequivocally, this is my movie, which gave us, people like us, opportunities. And there are other films where the director's like, listen, whatever number one wants is what we're doing. But even when I worked for Tom Ford via Jake Gyllenhaal, Tom had to meet me. And when we met, he said, well, yeah, I just want to meet you. And because to some extent they're being dictated by the actors who the HODs or who that makeup in charge of makeup will be. Apparently it wasn't that different in the 30s and 40s.
Oh, okay.
Where Joan Crawford or, Henry Fonda or, one of those big stars would say, because they didn't have personal makeup back then, they would just say, yeah, I want so-and-so running the department.
Which do you like better, being a personal or running like a massive department?
Running the department, maybe not massive, but I think I ran from being a personal. People ask me a lot. I was very fortunate and one of the very few people to have been a personal to many, many people. And I'm very proud of it. But I say this, I ran into a young makeup artist recently in Vancouver, and I said, it's a career killer. And I didn't mean it to sound awful, but what I wanted them to understand was if you opt for that, there's a kind of privilege that comes with it and an attitude. You know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
And certain people will be like, oh, well, I'm with so and so. And so they somehow become a little removed from the crew and they're perceived as different, or people are nice to you because you're connected. I never liked that feeling. Um, and I also learned very quickly that when you're the personal, productions don't call you back.
Also, the person, well, I don't know. People would say, I don't know if it's true, that the personals were making so much more money because they're on their own kind of.
Well, yes and no, which is also kind of a downfall because when I had been a personal for Mark Wahlberg even when I'd gone and worked with people who like Ethan Hawke or Maria Bello, people who'd asked me to, Kate Nelligan, I think it was more productions would realize and the actors would say, listen, you're going to like him.
Yeah.
He's not coming in to do some funny, weird thing. I would always jump in. That's what happened on Dragon Tattoo, where David Fincher does not like having personals. Uh, but what happened was there was an issue with Rooney Mara with makeup. And David Fincher had asked me, they asked me to stay one night and said, look, could you possibly help us with some of the makeup things we're having with Rooney Mara? And I said, I don't want to step on anybody's toes. I'm not in charge. But long story short, I did because Rooney had asked me and she was very nice. And it was more to show somebody newer, and I realized the value of somebody said, you're being wasted a little bit being a personal all the time.
Mm.
And so at that point, I made an effort to kind of leave that a little bit
Mhm.
and come back to department heading.
Oh, and like you work with so many incredible auteurs. That must feel like, and I know I saw you say somewhere that you don't sell yourself as a prosthetics guy, but of course, wasn't your Oscar nomination for prosthetics work?
Well, it was a bit of everything, but I think prosthetic makeup, it's always it can be very overrated, overinflated. But I think the beauty of what happened with that makeup was that it was combined being able to bring back a classic sort of old school makeup, practical makeup that people don't do any, well, they do now, but not that I'm responsible for bringing that back, but I think we helped
Mhm.
by creating the Baron as a practical makeup because Denis wanted to try it with, as he said to me, this is an experiment, my friend. Because we were both like, oh, fuck, like, can we really, we've got the money, but you've got to know, can you pull this off in 70 mil and on a very precarious situation where everybody's watching, saying, I don't like the new one. I like the book. I like the
Right.
kind of go, okay, let's try. So I went with my best foot forward and had ideas like Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now or Dr. Moreau, which they loved. And I sold the idea. And then my team in Sweden could build it. But I'm not really a prosthetics guy the way, I don't know, the way other people like Vincent van Dyke or, people like that. But I'm pretty good at figuring it out. And I came up with a pretty good idea and a pretty good plan, and then got some great people to work with me because you got to hire people who are as good as you or better.
Yes. Oh,
And,
that's fantastic. So you
and I,
use it as a tool in design rather than something to specialize in.
well, I think so because that's how a lot of my kind of idols worked. And so what happened was I went to my friend Lube Larson, who I met, he and his wife on Dragon Tattoo, and I said, "Look, Stellan, you guys know, I know Stellan. Why don't we try this? Do you guys want to come work for me, but work with me? And this will be kind of what we do." And we came up with a few things, and Denis was like, okay, we're going to try this. But we had an extraordinary prep time of 16 weeks, which is unheard of. You know that, Dan. I
Yeah.
mean, you could make 5 movies in 16 weeks. But I think at the time now, I mean, now, amazing, people, had then done The Whale, which was out of New York and Adrien Moreau, who did that work, brilliant. But again, other people went, you know what? We can do a practical makeup. We can do it practically and not just CG. However, for people listening, when you're making I don't know, a film like Nightcrawler, or I've just been watching old films recently, thinking, wow, how would you do that? There was an old Liza Minnelli movie on called Something Do You Love Me, Junie Moon? And it's a
Mhm.
very old film with Trevor Howard, who had been the president of Screen Actors Guild, and Liza Minnelli, a very young woman with a character who's got scars on her face. And I was looking at it going, that's a practical makeup. They didn't do a huge prosthetic makeup, but it worked.
Oh, great.
Worked in the film. Do You Love Me, Junie Moon? It was a very provocative film at the time. A
Mhm.
woman living with two men who had all been released from an asylum, basically.
Oh my God. I
And,
gotta watch it.
and so I think that so Dune was an example of a lot of prosthetics, but a lot of, I hate saying real makeup, but more pure makeup and hair. And that was it, but it doesn't happen very often.
It's amazing to me how you've embraced everything. Like you've even had to run hair departments and
Yeah. Well, I do that. And, my hairstylist friends that listen, don't get mad at me. I'm not trying to be a hairstylist or a hairdresser in any way, shape, or form. But if you really look at it from my point of view or other people, the reason some countries like the UK do it, it's not to take work away. Nobody's trying to say you're actually increasing the number of people working. The reason it works for somebody like Denis or certain types of directors is because you know how a director is. You of anybody is he or she or they may not have the wherewithal for the 10 conversations coming. And so if I were the director, me, Donald Mowat, and 10 people in the morning said, hey, Donald, good morning. Okay, what do you think of this? Should he be bald? Should he have hair? Should it be red? Should it be blonde? Should it be up? Should it be down? Does the scar? What? Overload. Plus you got your world. Plus you've got to talk to a script supervisor. Plus you've got your editor on the phone going, we got a problem. Plus the producers, plus the actors. So really, I think it makes sense on certain films. And of course, other films you go, like The Duchess, for instance, with Keira Knightley, which is a hair extravaganza. I could never entertain that as a hair designer, but who would? I mean, it's just immense. But the same way somebody who's a strong hair designer, which is what happened in the UK, um, and I don't think it's a bad idea, but certainly I still employ. It's just that I have a bit more control, being a terrible word for some people, but I think it's cohesive and the actors really like it.
I want to ask you about when actors are developing a character,
Mhm.
how involved, I would imagine some of them get very involved with you in the makeup design, and sometimes it's the director. What's the workflow like in some of your favorite experiences?
I think in the old days, I mean, going back to when we started, I think it was, I don't want to say better because people are different. People just change and we've evolved. I think in my experience was some actors will say, look, you're the expert. I rely on you. If you'll ask somebody, I love that about Daniel Craig. I mean, I remember going to do the first Bond and I thought, what am I doing here? I said something to him and he kind of looked up at me like, why are you asking me?
Oh, wow.
And I thought, okay. Um, but there are other actors that would be very offended if you didn't say, look, I was wondering, I was thinking. Now, that's what I loved about working with Jake Gyllenhaal because Jake is very, like his sister, I think they come from a film family. Mom is a writer, dad is a director. They've been around this their entire lives. Everyone they know is in the business. Godmother aunties, Jamie Lee Curtis, Paul
Oh,
was a godfather. Everybody's in the business. So I like going to Jake and say, hey, I was thinking, wouldn't it be interesting if we did this with your eyes? Or I change your eyes from because he's so distinctively Jake Gyllenhaal, and we do something and make your eyes brown, or do something to your hair, or whatever. And he loves all that. But other people really rely on you to come up with the ideas.
hmm.
Now, there's a new group of actors I feel will become a little dictatorial in the sense that they've worked it all out. It's a one-man show. And you know how that is. And there are people who are one man, one woman, one person shows that go, I don't want anybody interfering. And if that's the case, then you don't need me. I'm not just going to be there being told. Now, having said that, when I did things like The Fighter, Mark Wahlberg, who's an extraordinary producer, he had asked me, and that was probably the last film I worked with him on, second to last, because if he continued to make films like that, I was in.
Mhm.
But then he didn't do any more as a producer. And I was like, oh, that was too bad because he's excellent at it.
Oh, who knew? That's
He's
great.
excellent producer. I mean, he actually was behind Prisoners, he was behind other films, but The Fighter was so special to me because Mark called me and he said, he goes, Donnie, he goes, you're the right person for this because all those actors will like you. And, we had Melissa Leo, we had Christian Bale, we had Amy Adams, and I did everybody.
Oh,
And again, it was a smaller movie with very little money. I can't remember the budget, but it wasn't huge in Mark's state of Massachusetts, where he had a lot of friends. And Christian was not, he was a star, but he wasn't, it was Batman already, but
yeah.
it wasn't like I need, a hairdresser, makeup artist, 10 personal assistants. He was just, I'll go with your guy. And Melissa Leo was fab. And it was, for me, better times
Hmm.
because it was cohesive. And I don't know if you've noticed that in the last few years. I find the business, everybody's sort of in everybody else's business now. And then films don't look right, or
Mhm.
everybody's an expert. And I do think in my department, particularly, and it was a thing that made me very angry once in Toronto, of all places, which was my home, where like second ADs were piping up in production meetings.
Oh, yes. Okay. I now I understand
What
what
I
you're talking.
mean,
This is a problem of education, I think. I think new producers, especially coming up, they don't know about our jobs and they're not educating themselves.
that's
So, and yet they're telling us how it is, and they've done, we've
that's right.
had 30 years more experience than them in our
That's
role.
right. And that's what was happening to me. And I equated it where I was starting to get really pissy and angry. And the late great Shirley Douglas used to use a great expression, which I'm going to say, which was, she goes, darling, you have to slap the bitches down. And I thought, Shirley's right, because the only way I can describe it is, and I said this once to somebody, was I was on a movie and the actor or somebody was giving me like an order. And I was like, no, wait 1 second here. Because I made a point of saying, when I go to the dentist and I need, I don't know, a root canal, and they said, look, Donald, I got to tell you, we got to fix this. You're going to have a big problem. Okay. I can say to them, okay, I get it. Yeah, I feel something's funny up here. When they go to put the needle, which of course we all hate, and you look away and you're like, God help me. Do I stop the dentist and pull his wrist away and say, are you sure you're doing that right? Um, I even had it quite recently with a script supervisor who said, like, reminded me to spritz the actor. And I
Oh my
thought,
God. Oh my God.
I've been standing here like everybody else in 40-degree weather. And I thought, you need to stay in your lane. Occasionally, if I wasn't matching, I would understand a little. But to actually tell me, I thought, that's not for you to do.
Yeah,
And I
no.
think that's when I really realized there's a crossover now that's really inappropriate of other people telling people. It's like me saying to you as a script supervisor, have you timed that?
I had a first AD yelling at me because I let them cross the axis, which, by the way, we all talked about it. The Academy Award winning DOP, the director, and I agreed on an attack for the coverage that didn't involve one axis. And he was yelling at me. And Rico was watching. He said, rice bowl violation. I said, what's that? He said, he's putting his hand into your rice bowl.
Yes. Well, I love that. Well, to thank him for saying that, because I think for me, that's when I thought, I know what I'm doing. And I think to get to my age now where you actually have people that say things to you like, I'm it's actually something particular in the world of hair and makeup that you don't see, and I have my own theories about it. Costume as well, but I think also we get into areas that are dominated by, again, by women, by LGBTQ plus, by people who are diverse. I do think, yeah, would you say that? Would you go to the DP and say what you just said to me? You have to change how you fight for something. And I wished I'd learned politics of show business. I mean, I'm too old now, but I do wish I'd learned the politics of the business. Um,
Yes, it took me a while to, I mean, especially I was extremely shy. I do teach it to the students now. Like I do teach them what to expect and also to survive set bullies because we still have it. It's not as bad as it was in the 90s, but there's still bullies out there.
but you know, it's well, I guess I could be a bully too, but for me, it's about the work. Um,
There's a difference when someone demands excellence, that's about the work. But
yeah,
when someone is getting personal, yeah, it's shocking.
I agree, and I think that's what was happening. And I do feel like when I remember being in Toronto, Montreal, and even in LA, where certain departments, if you think about it and just stop and go, which departments get treated a certain way, you know, and people say, well, you know, they need to change lighting or whatever, and or there's a delay or there's sound or there's something, you don't hear the same thing they'll say if it's a makeup problem.
Right. They're rushing you guys all the time.
Nowadays, when I say to somebody, hey, we got to do that, like cover that tattoo or do this, they get all stressed. And I go, oh my God, are you sure this you're cut out for this? I wouldn't say it to them, but we used to do like, come on, hurry up. You got in. And so that's a difference of the times.
We have, of course, we have so many script supervisors in the audience, even on the in the YouTube audience. I really try to enforce to people that it's not really about the continuity; it's about preserving performance. So it's not always about matching specifically. So and when it comes to makeup, do you have any? I love the like, yeah, don't tell the makeup people how to do their job. That should be obvious. But
Mhm.
anything else in the workflow between our two departments that you would say to a new
I'm
client?
so glad you asked. I'm so happy, Danielle, that you asked that because so my good friends that I've been on their podcast on the Team Deacons.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so, you know, I've been on a few times and they're my great friends for many years, but Roger Deakins and James Deakins. Um, and James was a script supervisor
Mhm.
and a very good one. And I've learned a lot from both of them, but I've learned so much about filmmaking from James because she not only was a script supervisor, but you know, she'd done all what we had done, commercials and TV and series and movies, and of course Roger and you know, brilliant cinematographer and lighting cameraman in the true sense. But James knows stuff. Like you can sort of say to her when we did, I don't know, Sicario or Blade Runner, I can say to James, you know, I just don't know. And she'll say, I don't know if that'll cut because but you understand where you talk in a certain way. She's come to the makeup trailer. She knows what goes into the work
Mm.
that a lot of people don't. Now, yes, they have what do you know, because of who they are and their accomplishments and their reputations do give them carte blanche, but people could say that about me.
Mhm.
Uh, that, you know, if she wanted to come to the trailer and say hi to one of the actors, everybody's like, "Oh my God, it's James Deakins," and but you know what's great is that they also because one time Roger said, "You know, I really like that you're doing so much sweat on Ryan Gosling because in the way we're lighting here, we need that. We need." So I've always done makeups in a way that I can also go to the script supervisor and say, you know, I hope we can work well in the sense that I'll make the wounds happen, for instance, where they're ND. You don't know where they come from, but there's something because we haven't shot it, we haven't rehearsed. It's going to be, you know, the usual. And they always love that because I started introducing that, I don't know, 20, 25 years ago, saying you could completely, utterly screw up a shot by establishing something that you nor I know how that's going to play on the day where the actor's going to say, I'm not doing that.
Mm.
And then how did he end up or she end up with this big welt over here? So I've kind of worked out with script supervisors a way to say, it even happened here the other day. And it was great because we have a Panamanian script supervisor. And we were talking about it. And I said, well, the audience, they don't, in my mind, they don't really care
Mhm.
where that happens. All they need is the dramatic effect.
They just need the story. It's the storytelling through makeup, through all of, yeah.
That's it. And so if some stunt guy, because I have a bone to pick with some of them, come and say, yeah, but he did this and that. I'm like, okay, nobody knows this.
That's right, except stunt people. Yeah.
Time they cut this film and you get a great editor, I don't know, Joe Walker, and you go to Joe and say, Joe, does that, he'll be like, it doesn't cut, and we're going to move that here and do that there. It's a moot point.
Yeah.
So I've learned a lot about filmmaking with script supervisors and editors because sometimes they don't know stuff that they need to learn from me,
Mhm.
which is like, damn it, I don't like it when you guys print something and I know they're going to use the worst take for me. But then everybody gets bent out of shape if something doesn't match. And you're the first person to say, you know what? Wolfgang Peterson had it right. He said continuities for sissies. And on a certain level, he was right.
Yeah, it's about the performance. It's about the
That's right.
storytelling. It's about also about what the director wants because it could make no sense to us, but we live and die for, for the director in film and in television, the showrunner.
That's right. And I think that's what I learned was sometimes there's no point trying to figure it out and just going with ultimately what the director and as you said, a showrunner or whatever they want. Suddenly they look great. They were beat up the day before. It's not my movie.
Yeah.
I wish it were, but it's not.
What about because we have actually a lot of directors in the program and also in the YouTube audience. What about for a new director? Is there any advice you would give them on working with your department specifically?
Yes. I think sometimes they overthink. It's a terrible thing to say to somebody, you're overthinking it. But what I mean to say by that is that sometimes the little nuances that they're thinking of won't play. And many, many, many years ago, I remember being on a job where the director got very excited about, well, it would be great if they, and I could sense they were new, and that's what we're there to do, is to help.
Yeah.
It's also part of our job to educate. I said to the director, yeah, but it, just something I want to point out is that the audience, when they see that, they certain things happen in life, authentic bruises, you fall over here and bruise your knee. If you put that on film, people will go, that's terrible makeup. Um, there's things that happen in life. So I have had a director that said, I want, as they're dying, they're lying there dying, they can be all sweaty. And I went, well, actually, no, because you're not like that when you're dying. You're like this. And some directors, and you know this because you're the closest one to them, will say, but if I start spritzing, and that's life, that's creating life. And we had a very interesting incident on Nightcrawler where I'd done all kinds of dead people and accidents and the wonderful late Bill Paxton all gurgling up blood and he's there and Jake looking the way he did and this phenomenal movie with a new actor called Riz Ahmed who's become this sensational Oscar nominated incredible actor. But in his scene where if you've seen the film he's lying there on Ventura Boulevard and he's kind of gasping and this is it. And Dan Gilroy, who's one of my favorite writers. I mean, I think Nightcrawler's top 5 scripts I've ever read. And Dan said, hey, Donald, couldn't we have them all like what you did with Bill? And I'm like, yeah, but Dan, I'm just saying if I can offer a suggestion. We did Bill lying there gasping with the blood and the this and the ambulance and the lights. And here's Riz. And it's kind of promise you it'll be more impactful just having him kind of ghostly because he's going to die.
Hmm.
And I'm really glad I stepped over a little bit in that case because had we done him bloody and it indicates maybe you're okay. And it was final. And I really love anytime I see the film, I always go, God, Donald, that was a good move.
Good.
Because we use so much blood and so much dramatic effect in the film. I also never made Jake sweaty. I made him oily and greasy and jaundiced, but never sweaty. He's a cold-blooded killer.
That's
He's not
great.
sweating.
Do you have a favorite genre? Like, how do you pick your movies?
Well, I think at the time was really when you read something like Nightcrawler and you just go, God, this is effing great. It's so great. It's like Network, you know? I'd like to work on films I'd like to see,
Yes, me too. Yes.
right?
Yeah.
TV's newer for me. I mean, I'd left it for 20 odd years, and now, of course, everybody's in TV. So
Mhm.
I'd like to work on things I would watch. And then there's a few films that are hit or miss. We've all worked on those where you go, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Not too many, but there's a few. But I think the challenge, I like a challenge that's maybe based in reality, seems to be something I love. Somebody asked me once about, I don't know, Lord of the Rings style film. And I said, that's not what I do. Furry feet and pointy ears is like, oh, phenomenal people for that, but that's not for me.
Do you feel, because I felt this way in my case, our ability to read a script is actually helpful to our careers, even though it's because the projects we choose, for me, like sometimes I'll choose a low budget thing over something that would pay me. I literally did that with my Big Fat Greek Wedding. I was
Mhm.
offered a film that was paying 3 times more, literally, and I took my Big Fat Greek Wedding because I
You
read
get
that
that.
script
Mhm.
and it changed my career. Do you feel like that sometimes?
I do. I do. I turned down Chicago to do 8 Mile.
Oh my God. Oh my God. What a choice.
And if the people who did it did a great job, nothing, they were not as established as I am or was then. They must be feeling that way now, looking at new people. There was a difference in, I got paid more on 8 Mile.
Mhm. Oh.
Again, that's the thing of US, Canada.
Mhm.
Automatically, we're talking a difference back then of just between the unions and the countries, $20 an hour. And I will say this, and it's not in any disrespect to, Rob Marshall and what they did, excuse me, on their picture won all the awards that year. I felt that 8 Mile was more important
To a whole generation. Oh my God. Yes, of
to a
course.
generation of people. I think it's not a stage musical. It can't be redone. It was the greatest rapper, I think, of all time, next to maybe one or two other people. It had this thing that people still talk about. I don't hear anything about that other movie. Anywhere I go to this day, I'll walk into a classroom and they'll say, "Oh, we've got Donald," and they list off credits I've worked on, and nobody knows what they are, and it makes me laugh because we can't take ourselves too seriously. I mean, kids that I go and talk to at LA, South Central, or in London, they don't know Prisoners, they don't know those movies, but they know 8 Mile.
Oh yeah. My goodness. Iconic. I hope that we don't feel the need to just say yes because we need the money. Because I know that
Yeah.
at that point in my career when that was happening to me, I was still choosing by the script. And I still stand by that as being very important to the longevity of a career.
But what you're saying is so important. And I've been so unhappy the past couple of years because I've been trying to tell everybody I run into is saying, if your dream, no matter what you do, whether you're a script supervisor, costume designer, no matter what you aim to do or what your dream is, if you are coming into the business or have been in the business and you happen to be lucky and work a lot, um, I've had to call people back who I get text messages every day. And, oh, Donald, what am I going to do? There's no work and la, 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 la. And I went, okay. When I started, and you know this story, when I started, 1984, 85, I'd already been doing my job in theater. In high school, I was working. The first paid job I ever had, I remember thinking, I'm respectable. And I paid my rent. I have paid my rent and living my entire adult life doing this job.
Oh, wow.
And very few people can say that.
Hmm.
I never had to moonlight. I never, but very few people could say that. And I get people now who are nominated for Emmys and who've been in the business for 5 minutes. and they've gone on a TV series, one after the other. And whether they're in London or Toronto or Vancouver or Mexico City, then a strike came, COVID came and eliminated people tragically in both ways. And then strikes came, and now all these people are saying, I don't know what I'm going to do. And you said, well, okay, take a step back. You don't need a boat. You don't need that. Like, come on now. You're living a life your parents barely had. I noticed that particularly in the UK, I found it very disturbing. And the problems I've had with crew, any crew I've had trouble with, have been generally in a younger age group who are accustomed to getting mortgages at 25. When I bought my condo in Toronto in my 30s, and I was so proud of myself that I paid it off in 5.5 years.
Oh, nice.
But it was a little bijou little condo on Charles Street. I didn't buy a house.
Yeah, I've never owned a house. Is that funny? Yeah.
So here we are talking about houses and cars, and it's a lifestyle that we didn't have. And nor did we want it particularly. That was our parents. That was somebody else's parents. So there's a kind of and people get so angry with me, but I did tell someone recently, I said, you need to like check yourself and understand the life of an artist. You want to be called an artist and a craftsperson. Most actors don't make money.
Mhm.
If you're going to go do a TV series for 5 years and save every penny, buy a place, pay it off, and don't complain. But you also have people like me, and you certainly took chances. I turned down series to do movies, and
Mhm.
now movies shoot in 4 and 5 weeks. The best films do. And how do you survive? So I think we have to readjust.
You and I both have a luxury of multiple passports,
Yeah, yeah.
granted, but both of our jobs are international, and we go to where the work is, and that's what I try to tell people. Whatever line up your life so that you can work in as many places.
Yeah. I mean, I think that backfired on me a little bit because I think in Canada, what happened was, people listening who have dual nationalities and things. The problem in Canada was as soon as the tax incentives became so punitive, where everybody was getting a tax break, it just became like welfare for the rich. Was that the whole industry became, I have a British passport because of my mother and father. It never really stopped me from working there. And almost anyone can get a permit. But in the US, for instance, by the time I was working in the US, the work was leaving. And everybody said, God, there's more work in Canada, which was true.
Yeah.
Now, and I think what happened was in Canada, I resented the fact that I was paying union dues in different places and having a passport and paying, because you have to pay for all those things, getting your citizenship and green card. But I remember it was such hard work getting into the US. And I got there, and then suddenly everybody said, well, but this is what we're paying. And I said, but you want someone who can work in both countries. You need to pay me more because I got to pay tax in both places. And that's when I learned that first time I went to New York to work. I said to people in Toronto, we're doing something wrong here. When we go to work in the US, you have to be getting paid in US dollars. All you have to do is switch it and say, we're now getting whatever your rate was in Canada in US. My counterparts in Toronto weren't understanding that our rates were so low. I'm sorry, 873. I'm sorry, 891. I'm sorry. We were lowballed for most of our careers.
The new way of making film and deciding what is of value to new producers and
Yeah,
not understanding, like I feel so old when I see people do things like cutting prep for a lot of the departments,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
cutting staff for departments like yours where you need extra people on certain days. And I don't understand the mentality. And then the money goes there. There is money. There's still a lot of money. It's just where the money's being spent is strange.
I can't really, speak anymore about actors because we did our best supporting them always, and I don't really feel it was reciprocated. Yeah, and I expressed it too. The one person I really admire was a former SAG president, was Melissa Gilbert. So
Oh,
long friendship with her, and I, of course, worked with her a few times. Um,
Oh.
I did express to Melissa how very few people were really, really behind us in the strike,
Hmm.
recognizing our commitment to them. And Melissa was great because she wrote to me, she said, Donald, I really hear you loud and clear, because she knew what I was saying. And other actors were supporting us. But at the end of the day, I support the show Abbott Elementary. Everyone should watch because they actually raise money for crew.
Oh my God. It is a
Yeah,
great show though.
so I
Yeah.
watched it. It's on NBC.
Yeah.
Um, we were filming Presumed Innocent right up to the strike, and I was driving around my car at Warner Brothers with, I support the WGA West, but they have big star people to support their strikes. We don't. We don't have an income earner in the IATSE, someone like a top five movie star to donate to our fund. And
Right.
that made it very difficult for us because we were always going to be poverty stricken. And so when the strike was over, as you know, and I know, then every place that started to pick up some work, we felt suddenly like, oh, I know what's going to happen. We will pay the price for this.
Hmm.
We did, and we are. And so shame on people for not backing us up properly in our hour of need.
It seems like tell us about LA. What is happening?
Bad. It's tragic. I mean, I think it's tragic everywhere. London, everywhere. From I was over in London this summer. I taught a few classes, a few seminars. I see it now. What I did say to people, and it's certainly not a criticism, and I feel same way coming from Canada. When you give your industry over to lose your own sort of autonomy, like in the UK, who've made, I mean, the greatest films to me and television ever. Um, Certainly in the English language, I mean, they win everything. They win all the prizes, the Oscars, the Emmys. I mean, everything. And I said to friends of mine, but you have thrown out like the British film industry, those Mike Leigh films, those films that I love, to work on a Marvel film. Now, I love Marvel. I had a great experience with them. But if the entire industry is working on, excuse me, a Marvel film, and then a strike comes and your business collapses, the BBC's nothing now. So I felt the same way for us in Canada, as going, what's out there? There was one Canadian TV show apparently during the strike, and everybody obviously now wants to work on that. And I thought, well, shame on you, because when there was a time when we could have been doing more for our industry, like Canadian content, or insisting on having some Canadian actors cast in those parts. And I keep going back to Shirley, but I talk to, Corinne Coslow and other people in the world of actor and go, well, guys, you know what? Let's think about this. Those movies we were making in the 80s, the Adam Agoyan and Sarah Polley and Atlantis, we were doing TV series. We needed that. This was our moment. And I thought something was going to change, and it didn't. So I think we all have to take some responsibility. I mean, if somebody offered me today and said, hey, we're doing a movie, it's going to be here, it's going to be there, I'll do it. I will work for a reduced rate, but I've got to know everyone is.
Yes, of course. Yes.
But you and I both know this is not how it works. And we come from a very democratic place. And so I felt like that in Canada was when I first went to LA, I went, wow, look at these people. They live, cinematographers, makeup, costume, script supervisors. They live pretty well. They're making great money, pensions, all these things they have that we weren't having. And
Yeah.
yet I'd run into producers from the CBC, I'm sorry, CBC, that were minted and we weren't. And if we worked 14 weeks, so I developed a certain sense of an inequity was happening, and that we were supporting all of these things and yet not really looking after, trying to get our rates up, having our union really have our backs. I got the Canadian Screen Award for makeup. I
Oh,
did.
wow.
It took 20 years. I did that with a few people helping, but yeah, there was no leadership. Even when I went to the Actors Fund as a board member, I went to IATSE and got the money, the first round of money. that was my doing with
I
David
forgot to
Hope.
say that you are have been volunteering, working with the Actors Fund for so many years.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Canada, that's a lifeline for film technicians and actors to survive during things like the strike.
Yeah, 8 years I did. I served, I did, I was thrilled to do it. It was an honor to serve, our community. But I was doing that with Fiona Reid was our president. By the time I was finished, Fiona Reid had been vice president. There was Maria Topolovich. We also got the union on board. That's why 873 and 891 put dues donations. I feel very strongly. I had a lot to do with that going before Joe Fraser, who was our treasurer. That's no secret. That's what unions have to do.
Aren't we lucky though in one way because in Europe they have no unions. Margaret Thatcher broke, I mean, you have Beck too, but it's not really the same.
No, it's not. And I think, that's a great point too, because we have to fight to keep our unions going. But in order to keep them going, we also have to recognize what's wrong. And the recent publishing of salaries of union people is not helping.
Oh yeah.
I think, yes, I stand always as a union member and hold my cards dearly, but we also have to be able to say yes. But I can also say when we've not done right, we have to acknowledge it. Back to what you'd asked me originally with LA, I think what's really hard is the fact that people are scared about their healthcare and healthcare and something that if you come from the UK or Canada, even with the current problems people feel they're facing, and they're there. That's not, that's another thing, but that's something we never taught our own people. And I learned that at the Actors Fund because when I served at the Actors Fund, I was giving brochures out on sets. I was getting people who never thought about it. And that was about educating people to say, but what happens if you need supplemental insurance? What if you need physio after breast cancer surgery? What if you need physio after a knee or hip replacement? Um, and so the Actors Fund for me of Canada and the Actors Fund of America, now all AFC, all stemmed also from Equity Fights AIDS, Broadway Cares. That's where it really comes from.
Oh, wow.
And so knowing that part of history, I loved when I was back in Toronto, working on jobs where people didn't know. It's like the Canadian Screen Awards. And so one of the first things I did was in the Academy of Canadian Cinema when I was the art department rep was I petitioned to give the Actors Fund of Canada a special Gemini Award for their contribution to our industry, our community. They
Life.
kept lights on, literally and figuratively, for so many people. And then now our unions do dutifully support it. And from Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg, all over, and what was happening at Stratford where like on Broadway where they do the bucket collection, Stratford did it. It's a question of community.
Well, no wonder you got the Order of Canada.
Well, I think that was a very nice thing because I think it's something I admired a lot. I admire a lot about the Governor General, the Honorable Mary Simon, because I think she, for me, personifies that. I think she's remarkable. This kind of what she's all about. So I'm interested because I've done work for Indigenous kids and I just think it's a piece of us as Canadians, as where we come from, is a bit lost, in the how big it got. And certainly going to LA, I think that's why people called me and said, "Hey, do you want to come and do this at a school?" And then I working with Don Gilliam on a number of films, then you start to meet other people who are like-minded, as and you go, oh, what about this person? So that helped me a lot. And I think in LA right now, it's just very tragic to see a lot of people who are my age, I think are feeling timed out.
Mhm.
I feel like they need to move on. And then young people are reconsidering their futures. And I say to them, don't do anything drastic. This is a business that you just haven't learned how tough it is.
Well, it's like this, like the waves, when it's high, and when it's low, it's low. So you
But
got to
we knew
save.
that.
We
They
knew that.
never, they never experienced it.
Yeah.
So I think when you've suddenly experienced, It's like what the old people tell you. This is what they were talking about. Um, so it's not to despair. Of course, they're going to make films and TV, but in a different way.
Yeah. And in different places in a different way. I
Yeah,
mean, I don't think LA could ever fully die anyway. There's just so much, so many studios, so many, just so
yeah,
much.
yeah. I get calls from friends of mine who are older who say, Donald, I don't know what to do. And I said, if you feel like you're okay and you can pay the bills and, there's food on the table and the rent's paid, there's nothing wrong with retiring. And a lot of people come to an age where, look, I'm thinking I'm getting there, is that in the real world, you wouldn't be working in a lot of the jobs we're doing. It's unsafe, as we know, in certain jobs. It's long hours, it's travel, your health changes. We all
Oh
know that.
yeah.
We just want to make sure we have good benefits while we are working so that for me, I don't know. I turned 61 this year. I've been working for 40 years. I don't know. I think it's enough.
Great.
It's enough, right? Um, but we need to encourage more people to teach and maybe producers to pay people to come in and do what we do.
That is the shocking part to me, how much there's an expectation that people will be trained, and especially in like the very technical fields where people where safety is an issue. I mean, like
I
sometimes
know.
they'll put up the money for that, but all the trades, like we're losing talent due to the economy, but we're also losing talent because of a gap in training that there's been so many people that were so protectionist about their jobs that they felt if they trained people, they would lose their own.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, I think that maybe all of these schools and things that you know, kind of just erupted all over the place. I think that maybe we bring it back in, and I'm not opposed to people. Obviously, we have to make a living and you should get paid. And I do a lot of things for free, but I also say, but there is, it was a great Chris Christopherson quote. I don't do it for the money, but I don't do it for free.
We have this incredible opportunity to have a continuity, to pass along some, hard-won knowledge, hard-won knowledge. Do you want to say anything about your work with BAFTA Los Angeles in more detail? Because like, do people, for people who don't know about it?
Well, yeah, so BAFTA, I do work for both London and now they're calling it BAFTA North America.
Oh,
Uh,
great.
I've had a few, I was hesitant to say that because I don't want to take away from the Canadian Academy and what they're still trying to do. It's hard, we both know what that's like. And of course, in Mexico, they have their own part of North America. People forget um, that Mexico is North America. And
Yeah.
so a lot of these organizations are forgetting, what's out there. BAFTA LA, I'd been involved with BAFTA London with a program they had called BAFTA. They had Guru, they had, right now it's BAFTA Connect, which is a more kind of intermediate level of all filmmakers. But they have things like BAFTA newcomers. It's on their website. I won't bore everybody with details that I don't explain very well, but the thing that struck me was people in the industry, whether they're in London or Glasgow or Los Angeles or New York, donate their time to go to schools to meet people. That's how you and I reconnected, who say, I'm not sure. I kind of like editing, but maybe this. And you think maybe script supervisor, maybe somebody says makeup, but maybe hair. Sometimes I'll go into a school and there's always one or two young kids who are very shy and a hand might come up. Um, and I'll say, what are you really interested in? I said, I'm always really into like the hair. And I'll say, we have a real shortage of people doing that. Um, so that's how I started with them, is going in with Sharon Ross, who's an editor by trade and profession, and we would go in, and we were a great team. And to Daryl McCain's class at Washington Prep High School. These are kids who do not have a connection to the AFI. These are kids that do not have a connection to NYU Film School, incredible institutions. But I'm more, I guess, from my background from the UK, particularly from Scotland, it's like Miss Jean Brodie. Everything in Scotland was about free education. So for me, it's a little bit like that. Kids who can go to those schools don't need me coming to them for no money. But if you come from a school where you're on your own, really on your own, or a letter from somebody. So we have people who got into UCLA or, different schools, colleges. I think is the best thing that BAFTA do. And it's the reason they're a charitable organization.
Mhm.
That's why the late Queen was a patron and Princess Anne and now, the Prince of Wales, because it embodies everything that people believe is right. So they have a lot of great programs. They have this new program. So people who are interested should look at BAFTA and the programs they have. And the Academy, same thing in LA, they have Academy Gold, they have education programs, the Student Academy Awards, the Nickel Fellowship, which members of the Academy like myself volunteer to read scripts, but you read scripts of the future filmmakers. And some of these films get made. And sometimes somebody goes, this script, I'm going to give this to so and so. And when you go to the Student Academy Awards, this year they'll be in London. Last year they were in LA. They do this incredible thing of past recipients, and they're huge names, some of them. So it's kind of incredible to do work for the Academy, the Student Academy Awards, the Nickel Fellowship, and then BAFTA. I believe in it because it takes nothing for people like you or me
Mhm.
to just. I brought Don Sparks, the first AD. I've brought other makeup artists, hairstylists, producers. I've said to people, hey, let's do something. I would like to do something here in Mexico City.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
Latin America, kind of a bit forgotten. In London, I go and work with young people who we want to do a boot camp eventually. And as we come out of COVID and other things and the strikes, is finding sponsors. So my head is always busy of things, and I know you do the same thing. And I would love to have done it in Canada. I'm just a bit sorry we're a little bit late at some things.
I do have to say, I am a product of the Canadian Academy. I grew up very poor in Jane and Finch, very no connection to the film industry. And if it wasn't for the Academy apprenticeship program, that's how I got into the film business.
Yeah, you see, to hear that is heartwarming because, I'll still be happy to go to an AFI, but it's a different thing,
Yeah.
you know, so people listening who are young filmmakers, if you need, but you also have to pay that forward.
Yeah,
And
exactly. Yeah.
right, and volunteer. So when I have friends like this young filmmaker, Quinn Halleck, was making a film, I said, now listen here, if I'm going to help you and give you advice, because he was calling me and I said, okay, I've got two people. You need to bring them on and give them a credit because that first credit is everything. So I had a young person who wanted to do makeup. I think it was really important to get people. So costume, makeup, were the areas I have some knowledge of.
Phenomenal, phenomenal. And you see how it changes lives. I think our why is sort of similar in the sense that we felt like outsiders coming into the business, and we're like,
Yeah.
it shouldn't be like this for people.
If somebody's a Nepo baby, embrace it because there's no point denying it.
Yeah,
Everybody,
yeah.
we get it. It's fine. You know what? I'm not going to hold it against you, but you don't need that extra hand
Yeah.
that a person who is a person of color or LGBTQ plus or diverse needs that extra little help if they don't have that connection. You talk about all this diversity and empowerment, but I said it's really not about, for me, not about hiring, say, a Black makeup artist to do Black actors. I want a Black makeup artist to work on everybody the way I work on everybody. And if you have two principal actors that are people of color and you bring on certain people, it's obvious what you're doing. Why not have a department where I have two other artists with me and I'm running hair and I have one actor who happens to be an African American actor made up by me and the one person of color doing makeup be working on the
That's
European makeup.
great. That's great. Mhm.
Why not pay for this and bring back these apprenticeships, bring back having that ability so that I can do the work in the morning, get people ready, be the guy to go to the director. But sit on a set for 14 hours is ridiculous at a certain age.
Yeah, I agree.
'Cause I think this is the moment to really, you know, get people the next group of training.
And there's a whole new gen that beats me. My own students are beating me out for work, which makes me happy.
Are they really?
Yes, I'm so happy. There's some superstars coming up, and I've helped them negotiate higher contracts.
For
Yeah.
you?
Oh, Monique, do you have any questions?
Thank you so much for taking the time to both of you for taking the time to chat. I really, really appreciate it because yeah, there's a lot of mystery around filmmaking and for us that haven't been in it very long, and this helps a lot. So thank you. I guess my first question would be, what would you say takes a makeup artist from good to great?
I guess it depends who you ask. I've never actually been asked that, so it's a great question. It depends on who you ask. I think if you were to ask an actor, the person who gets to know us best are the actors.
Right. Okay.
And
Yeah.
sometimes the director, but more often the director, if they're very trusting, want us to lead the way and
Got it.
take care of a lot of their work in, you know what I mean, in some ways,
Yeah. Yeah.
and facilitate the look and the feel. I mean, to me, what makes somebody good to great, I think it's a makeup artist who knows that what they do is a part of telling a story, but they are not the story.
Got it. Got it.
So, I think that if you were, unfortunately, when you have people who are very creative and visual and artistic, what happens is sometimes you get a lot of people, type A people, type whatever, you get a lot of kindred spirits. Actors, remember the first actors in Hollywood, in the silent films that didn't make it to sound, ended up, a lot of them training in makeup. And the first makeup artists were. So I think, having said that, a lot of actors will say, thank you for listening. Thank you for thinking of that. Thank you for, I think I'll ask somebody, look, it's your character. How do you see it? How can I help you get to that? So whether it's, Daniel Craig or Emily Blunt, I can say to them, is there a way for me to help you? Can I help? Whether it's
Okay.
tears or crying or, and some people say, I don't ever want to do that, but I might need your help because I can't do 10 takes and get my eyes red again. Or,
Right.
So I think that's what makes it good, because technically, some of the makeup artists now are not technically very savvy.
Okay.
That is something that you need to think about, because what's happening is, with so many films having CG and different things, makeup artists focusing now on the craft, the discipline of the makeup, but more disconnected. And particularly hair have this issue where, because they come often from outside the industry and makeup often from inside. But I think you were a script supervisor, right?
Yes. I started out doing some acting and I still like to do that. But I really want to get on set just more
Yeah.
frequently, and
Yeah.
I've been
Well,
searching for that role. Yeah.
I think you'll have a personal, kind of a certain vantage point, because having knowledge of acting and script supervision and things, you bring something else. Like people who come into makeup who were, I've known people who came in from nursing, or it's also a caregiver's job in a certain way. So a lot of makeup artists that say, oh, if I weren't doing makeup, I'd be a doctor or I'd be a nurse. It makes complete sense. I mean, somebody gets something in their eye on set. You don't want the medic, get the makeup artist to take it out, please. An actor gets cut. It just happened the other day. The actor will call me to do it. They're never going to have the medic touch. Never. Unless it's, we're calling 911. So a makeup artist is a caregiver in its own way.
That's actually one of the things that really intrigued me about this, is being able to have that comfort with the actor.
Okay.
actually. Yeah,
Well,
and talking with them. Yeah.
that's what will happen. You'll see actors will come to you with, I mean, you don't want to be, the psychiatrist, but they will come to you unlike anybody else on the
Mm,
set. There is no one out there. There is nobody that they are going to say the things to. So you own a lot of secrets, and that's okay because you keep those. And I think we need to separate two things. There's the makeup artist, the actual craftsperson who does the work. But I think what it is what makes the good person. The makeup, there's a lot of great makeup artists. The people much better than me. And I go, okay, why don't they work? Why do I work? I think it's exactly that. They lack compassion, or they lack a caring, or they're in it for the money, or people pick up on that.
okay.
It took me a long time to realize that. But an actor once said to me, you know, when you see the time cards on people's stations, you kind of go, put that away. But when you think ahead, when you say to an actor, look, your job as a great makeup artist is anticipating
Got it. Got
and
it.
everything to the set that you need. Or if the script supervisor said, hey, what do you think about that? How are we going to match that? Is it going to be a problem? And say, listen, I thought about this. I think the way Jane Ann Tengren said that to me on a Bond movie, she said, thank you for teaching me how to sell a shot. Because one day I said, Jane Ann, we are never going to match this. So no matter what, I promise you, I will not embarrass you.
Okay.
It's her responsibility in many ways. So for me, that's what it is. And I think also asking the actor, what do you feel you need? What do you think will help? Because if you go as a makeup artist and say, I feel, I believe, I want, then you're barking up the wrong tree, because they will let you know that's not how they want to work.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Thank you so much.
That helped.
Yes. Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yeah. It's giving me a focus on understanding the importance of the relationship between the two, going back and forth. It's not just a one-way thing. Yeah. Yeah. And putting time into that, into working on that too. Not just my technique.
And
Really think
the
that.
thing with technique, just so you know, a lot of people don't worry about things. People get panicky and nervous. What if they don't? Everybody's different. Some people say it's their face, right? It's their face. They know, if somebody says, no, can I do this? Don't fight that. It's not a bad reflection on you. If the actress says, no, you know what, don't, I can do my own lips. That's not because you don't. It's because that's what they do. Get over yourself. I think that people misunderstand. I have an actor right now. I really adore this kid. And I like her to do her own hair because I really want it to look like she did her own hair. Nobody's upset if people get all, but I have to do it because it's my job. I think that that's a bad makeup artist. That's a bad hairstyle.
Interesting. Oh, that's such a good point. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
because in the end, it's about recreating, doing, you should watch a film one day called The Dresser, Albert Finney and Tom Courtenay, because it's like the dysfunction of an actor in the dresser, but who helps do his makeup and the wigs and everything. But it's really brilliant because you see how the roles reverse.
Oh.
Gyllenhaal and I have that a little bit, where some days, like, he just says, no, I know this more. And I let him put his tattoos on. And I'm like, okay, go ahead. You don't fight that. It's great. It's great to have a relationship that in makeup and those things, because then the actor really trusts you when you can be frank with somebody and say, oh, you really screwed that one up, and we laugh about it. And so yeah, and that's it. And also, okay, last thing, good makeup artists and great is people who don't treat the background and the crowd nicely. They're bad. They're crap at what they do. So good makeup artists and great treat everybody like they're Judi Dench.
Got it. Would you say that that's what you look for people that you bring onto your team as well? Like people
Well,
that
yeah, Yeah, because if people don't treat different actors and background, treat them, say hello to everybody that comes on the trailer, you'd be surprised at the bad manners this business has, you know, people have developed. But it's just somebody has to be the parent, right? In anything. And you have to introduce people, and the actors don't even know. An actor will sit next to another actor in the trailer and nobody introduces themselves. And I'll say, well, I'm the senior person, I'm in charge. The trailer's mine, right? I'm in
Okay.
charge.
Yep.
So I'll say, oh, have you met so and so? Break the ice, you know, make everybody welcome. But that goes for the background. That goes for the stunt players, you know, even if they can be jerks sometimes, or the background misbehaves sometimes because they don't know. Don't change your makeup. Don't do this. Don't do that. You got to come back with the same, but treat everybody like they're Judi Dench. If you do that, it'll come. You'll be great.
Amazing, amazing. And would you say you look for people that, like you were talking about having that relationship with actors where, like, if they say, "Oh, I got that," or "I can do this," like, would you say that's another thing you look for someone on your team that you know you can have that back and forth and knowing where your skill sets are
Yeah,
and stepping in
yeah,
and
yeah, but you must be very careful about all that skill set business because sometimes people have all of that, and it's a newer world because we don't. I know where that comes from because the union and different people put that out. Must be, must be. It's like job applications. Must be proficient. Must be. Oh, that's such hogwash because nobody is. If you were that proficient, I'd be working for you. So
got
when I
it,
see
got it.
these things, oh, we're looking for a makeup assistant. I'm like, oh my God. Um, no. So I think people tell me, oh, I can do this, I can do that. Well, actually, where? Where did you learn to do that? Because that resume is so impressive. I can't do that. Um,
Mm,
and I've had this happen many, many, many times. And I would say just be truthful of the work. Just because you took it in school and you did a course doesn't mean you're proficient in, say, age with makeup, age with paint, or period makeup. You know, if somebody says period makeup, can you do 1920s? Well, I worked on a 1940s thing. Well, if you've done 1940s, you can be shown how to do 20s. But you
mm,
have to ask the question, are we doing authentic 20s? Are we doing
okay,
real people? Are we doing working class people? Are we doing, you know, ladies of the night? Are we doing titled people? Are we doing Downton Abbey? Are we doing The Crown? Are we doing country people? You know,
right, right.
that's a great makeup artist to say, are we doing authentic 1960s or do you want what people really looked like? Because they, you know, that's a good makeup artist to a great makeup artist.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much, Donald. This has been
My
so
pleasure.
incredible. Thank you so much.
Oh my, bye, darling. Thank you so much
Bye-bye.
for having me.
Thank
Okay. Thanks so much.
you.
Okay.